Dobar den, poštovani naši, programa da vo fokusu Silvana Pavlovska. Welcome to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. Today is the 9th of April 2024. It's a Tuesday, and we are continuing our series on the Macedonian question, and specifically talking about the PRESPA agreement as a cultural genocide of the Macedonian national identity towards the termination of an illegal treaty, a scholarly publication from 2023 by Professor Dr. Igor Janev. Chapter 4. So, the Macedonian legal ID, which is the state's name, was all the time in their Macedonian background, he says. And before they renamed themselves by the constitutional changes, or through the constitutional changes, they, through the cunning and deceitful international treaty, avoiding the legal ID for the second party, international community could not change the domestic name of a country by its acts or decisions. If, for instance, Macedonia had never joined the United Nations, this country would presently still be the Republic of Macedonia, without any obligation to negotiate or revise its official state's name under foreign interference. In fact, any moral statesman with dignity, when confronted with a dilemma, in quotation, to join the United Nations with provisional designation or abandon it, end of quote, would rather withdraw the application for the UN membership. They would withdraw that application for the UN membership, then be humiliated to negotiate the national name with the country that didn't recognize the national applicant's identity and its basic rights to self-determination and sovereignty, including the basic human rights of the people. As we've already explained in this publication, the Macedonian leaders repeated the same mistake again and again by admitting or confessing that they were in a dispute with a neighbor in the case of Greece, not just once, twice, in 1993 and then again in 1995, and then with Bulgaria in 2017, and later when actually they started the negotiation over the so-called historical issues. As we have seen here, a dispute with Bulgaria already produced a set of actual compromises on all for historical relevant, I beg your pardon, for historical relevant Macedonian persons, that is, that were with consent, they declared that the Bulgarians, they were Bulgarians according to interpretation by the Bulgarian government. Chronologically up to the 20th century, that is until Macedonian hero Goce Delcev was the last relevant individual to be proclaimed as Bulgarian. And from that moment, as it appears, the game with Bulgaria could not go further. The fact that the Macedonian international institutions did not respect the will of the people, and specifically Western international community, made the PRESPA agreement possible. The Western community that invested so much in the PRESPA agreement didn't understand the concept of people's sovereignty arising from the sovereign citizens or nationals and inherent moral dignity, and put pressure for direct violation of the constitution and redefinition of the state's legal identity, inherently related to the national dignity, a sovereign and independent will of the citizens and the people, and their right to self-determination as a basic, inalienable right. The right to self-identification of every national group is related to the inherent independent right to the state's self-determination, free choice of the name that is unbreakably linked to the state's and people's dignity, protection of moral standards, and the basic elements of the statehood. its judicial personality. As we mentioned previously, the concept of the United Nations and the UN Charter is based on people's sovereignty and self-determination with no interference. That is, the right of the people to self-define themselves in dignity as an absolute free choice, including determination of its own cultural identity based on respect to their original beliefs and traditions or history. Therefore, according to some authors, we may derive the following principles of law. 1. No external regulation or act adopted outside the state itself can determine, create, impose, or abolish the state's legal identity and the constitutional or national name of the nation state. 2. No external regulation or act adopted outside the state can determine, create, impose, or abolish the national or national collective identity, which is subject to self-determination. If we apply here the presented principles in the Macedonian case, we can only make a conclusion that all negotiating framework defined by the UNSC Resolution 817 from 1993 and supported by the UN Security Council Resolution 845 from 1993 was an illegal one. This is a simple conclusion. This simple conclusion follows from the fact that any legal outcome in the form of act or compromise would necessarily violate the basic principles of the international law, including the jus cogens norms such as self-determination, non-interference, and judicial equality or sovereign equality of member states in the United Nations. Most of the UN members foreseen such absurd result and unilaterally recognized the FYROM as the Republic of Macedonia, with no observance for limitation provided by the Security Council Resolution 817. Just before the Macedonians renamed themselves, it appears that over 140 states have recognized it as the Republic of Macedonia, although the Macedonian diplomats never lobbied and requested them to do so. For the majority of the UN member states, the difference over the name was never the security issue. Unfortunately, it seems that Macedonia was the only member in the international community that didn't understand that. So they kept negotiating on the issue to the very end with regard to the PRESPA agreement. After the United Nations Security Council Resolution 845 from 1993, there were no other Security Council resolutions or meetings or acts demanding negotiations with the two states. By that fact solely, it was actually demonstrated that the problem between the two countries was not one of a security nature. And as we can derive from the nature of the UNSC Resolution 845, 1993, as a recommendation to the UNGA, it was never the security issue, even from the very start of the process. As we explained with respect to Resolution 817 of 1993 and the creation of an irrational negotiating framework. It should also be noticed that the so-called security issue never actually ended in the Security Council after the PA or by any Security Council resolution dealing with issues, as was usual practice for conflicts or disputes regarding Security Council decisions. There was only a simple notice sent to the UNGA that a difference was resolved between the parties. All affairs about the name issue finally ended by ordinary registration of the treaty in the UN Secretariat with no reference to security aspects. From the judgment of the International Court of Justice, ICJ 2011, we also learned that the alleged irredentism accusations against Macedonian state were actually rejected or ignored by this court in its proceedings. Namely, the International Court of Justice in its proceedings proved that all accusations against Macedonia were legally groundless. Still, most Macedonian diplomats today still believe that the name issue had the security character, demonstrating lack of knowledge, of course. What I found, says Professor Igor Janev, What I found strikingly important for the outcome with the PA was that in general, the political culture in Macedonia was very low, since people basically didn't understand the problem and blamed the foreign powers. And on the other hand, politicians in their ignorance rarely suspected the bad intentions coming from Western partners and even Greece. Finally, at the end of our discussion in this publication, Professor Igor Janev says, I will try to predict the possible outcome for national destiny and consequences of the PRESPA agreement, including the magnitude of damages for the state and the regional security. Instead of bringing peace in the region, the PRESPA agreement served as a ground for destabilizing the relation with Bulgaria, giving a bad example with the PRESPA agreement how through an ID treaty state can accomplish their interests. By creating a dispute and a treaty such as the Bulgarian Friendship Treaty from 2017, blackmails and conditioning could either create a new ID treaty for redefinition of history, language, or more likely tear down bilateral relations, the level of threats with military intervention, as we have seen from the statements of the Bulgarian Minister Karakachanov. The Bulgarian Friendship Treaty served as legal basis for illegal conditioning regarding the imposition of the Bulgarian truth and one-sided interpretations that all Macedonians were Bulgarians and that Macedonians need to learn the truth before Macedonia starts the process with the EU for admission. The leader of the opposition, Christian Mickovski, with respect to the Bulgarian treaty, stated that this treaty created only problems. We quote, Zaev can't continue to hide from the public and avoid revealing what is being negotiated. He needs to go before the press and inform the citizens about the new additions that Sofia demands are made part of the EU accession process. In a similar context, a leading party member of Vomerod-Depomene, I. Dimovsky, declared that the PA led to the dispute with Bulgaria, namely Zaev's PRESPA treaty with Greece and the redefining of the Macedonian national identity contained in it opened the door for Bulgarian politicians to condition Macedonia, and in addition, quote, pointed to the admission that Zaev that former Bulgarian Prime Minister Borisov was himself involved in the preparation of the PRESPA treaty, so that, quote, the PRESPA treaty redefines the Macedonian national identity and bans us from evoking the Macedonian timeless civilization heritage. There is no similar treaty in Europe that would have two countries define what it means when I say that I feel as a Macedonian. What is the meaning of the word on the different sides of the border? Now, Bulgaria wants a similar redefining of the Macedonian identity. The ultimate goal of both Bulgaria and Greece is to downgrade the Macedonian national, ethnic, and linguistic identity. Even from the beginning of the process in 2020, Christian Mickovski from the opposition party gave his statement that the Bulgarian treaty needed to be renegotiated. Quote, I will ask for a clear declaration that we will not negotiate on the uniqueness of the Macedonian language, identity, and history. And if Bulgaria continues to demand these concessions for us, the treaty with Bulgaria will be dead. Mickovski also stated that, quote, artificial nations and rootless trees wither and die, end of quote, and added in conclusion, quote, if we break this link in the chain of our existence, we break our continuity. If we give up the partisans, we will give up the Ilinden Committee, and if we give them up, we will also give up on a century of our struggle for liberation. What will we have left then? End of quote. And we are going to end this here and now because that's been quite a bit of information that I have shared with you. So just a reminder, you're listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska, and the topic is the PRESPA Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity, a scholarly publication by Professor Dr. Igor Janev, who's an expert on international law. And I thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.